Hello, dear listeners. Welcome to another episode of your favorite podcast, the Three-Faced Podcast, starring myself, Chetan, my friend Anuraj, and my other friend, Dylan. And today we have a very special guest star who I have a personal connection to as well. So it's a privilege to introduce Jean Burke. And you were my swimming coach last year. And I'm sure we're going to get into all of the history together, but it's hard to introduce you in a couple of sentences when you've had such a crazy and awesome life and career. But just to give our audiences, I guess, a bit of flavor, Jean has been an elite athlete in the swimming space. He's participated in 2 World Cups in Dubai and Australia. And when he was in his prime young days, not that you're not anymore, I think you're still glowing, but he got a full Division 1 scholarship in university in the States, if I'm not correct. Yep.
Absolutely.
Beautiful. So I was going to do something unorthodox this time. Before we start, I was talking to you guys earlier, and I was just so grateful today about the beautiful weather we have, the fire pit, some food, the people, the animals. It's all just really great. And I was kind of thinking maybe before we kick off and really get into the detail of it, maybe we could just take a minute of guided meditation.
Sure.
We could just kind of do a little bit of breathing, and our listeners at home can follow along as well.
Finish with 3 arms?
Yeah, maybe we can do that too. Totally. Why not?
Synchronized.
Oh yeah. So maybe I'll invite you guys and listeners to just close your eyes or lower your gaze, unless you're driving or walking. In that case, keep your eyes open, and slowly bring that attention to your breath. Just focus on that inhale and exhale. So just feel the awareness of your body as your chest or your stomach rises and falls. And for a moment, just set aside all the things in the day that have happened up until now, and just focus on this moment, that you are here and you're existing. And life's good because you are existing. And maybe while you're here, you can think of one thing that you're grateful for today. I'm just going to take a couple breaths at our own pace. And when you're ready, you can gently open your eyes and get back to driving, because that's what you were doing. So I guess it's time to jump into this podcast. Jean, would you like to say a few words before we begin? Maybe just give us a little bit about yourself. I feel like I wouldn't have done it justice with my intro. Yeah. So I guess what is your background, and I mentioned swimming, so maybe you can talk a bit about what drove you into that field and why it was your calling.
Yeah, great guys. Thanks, Chet. So basically I grew up like any kid in Australia, and we live in a country that's surrounded by oceans and beaches, and as you guys are Indians, I always try and draw analogies, as I had several Indian clients and lots and lots of different people that I've taught to swim in my post-career, and the thing has always been about saving your life, and that's the reason why my mum wanted me to learn to swim, was to save my life. As my father had 3 fishing boats, we would regularly trip out to Moreton Island, Stradbroke Island, etc., many miles out to sea. So the initial reason was as a life-saving mechanism, and I've subsequently built my professional career on saving kids' lives and people's lives, transforming people with personal training, dealing with people's issues, health issues, all that different kind of stuff. So I guess, the number one reason was, life-saving. I'm a Scorpio. I've got an affinity to water naturally. I find it very soothing and just a fantastic way for me to do an active meditation. I learnt that post my swimming career, which is why I still try and swim a few laps every day if I'm lucky to. I feel like it's one of the most beautiful things you can do for your body. You can do it well into your later years. Yeah, and it really stills my mind, kind of like yoga does. And I always bring it back to you guys, being Indians, and your storied history of having several gurus and enlightened beings that have come out to India. My mum taught me the Surya Namaskar when I was 4 years old, so my spiritual existence has kind of been interwoven with lots of, gurus, enlightened souls, whether they're Patanjali or Osho from India, and different guys like this. It's been very intertwined with my cultural upbringing here in Australia. They say we don't have much of a cultural kind of thing, but I guess it's kind of the cultures that do come to this beautiful land that we live in that we kind of learn to adapt from and learn, or on the flip side, just be complete ignorant bogans.
I completely disagree, Gene. It seems like you're a very well-travelled individual.
Thank you.
But as an Aussie beach boy, at what age did you start swimming? And what kept you going, aside from, I guess, wanting to stay alive after jumping off your dad's fishing boat?
Yeah, so at 6 years of age, we left the hustle and bustle of Brisbane CBD. My father was a very successful electrician. At the same time, he was a great provider, but also a very heavy drinker and alcoholic. He came from a surfing background. He was also a professional high jumper and athlete. Anyway, we made the move to Byron Bay, New South Wales in 1989, back when Byron Bay wasn't necessarily as, you mentioned Byron Bay to people that travel to Australia these days, and there's Sydney, Melbourne, and the next mention is, have you been to Byron Bay?
Yeah.
So anyway, we moved there, and I just loved swimming, and I knew I was good at it, and I don't know, from 7 or 8 years of age, I guess it was a great escape for my energy. It was an escape at the time for the turmoil in my mother and father's lives that I perhaps didn't know of necessarily. And all I knew was I just wanted to push myself to be an Olympic champion. And, I just had to really, really laser focus and I took it quite seriously from 7 years of age.
That's actually really cool. Did you find that having made a decision so early, as you grew up and as you got to puberty and even later when, you have a lot of influences as you grow up, did you find that ever wavered until you got to your goal? Or was it just a consistent, to hell with the rest of the world, I'm going to go in the pool?
Yeah, no, it was plagued by quittings, by different family struggles that I was going through. I actually quit swimming, threw away my goggles when I was 13 years old. My mother and father divorced. I lost my whole will for being a competitor, for an athlete, because I realized as a young adult and going through puberty, as you say, that there's probably a little bit more to life than just fucking beating people, and just being a badass. I started to realize that life is a little bit more polarizing, and I guess the life experiences that I had at that point led me to really kind of go anti-swimming. So that was a year and a half where I sat in Byron Bay and I sat around with the boys smoking bongs and pounding beers all day long.
Sorry, at 13?
Yeah, 13, 14 years old. Yeah.
I wish I grew up in Byron Bay.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's the end of the road. A lot of people go there for liberation of themselves, escaping different, weird, oppressive, so they can really, that's the beautiful alternative space that I did grow up in. At the same time, that beautiful alternative nurturing space was not really probably the best space for me as a kind of a little bit of a troubled young adult. And which is why I then moved out from home when I was 15 years old. I'm like, no, you're not going to be a bonghead. You're not going to grow here, surfing and just, pimping out girls every holidays from all over Australia.
Wow.
You're going to go, you're going to move away, and you're going to make something of your career. So yeah, I did. I made a hard decision at 15 years of age and moved out of home, moved 40 minutes north to an Olympic training squad, which then had several of the most famous Olympians. I grew up with Ian Thorpe. He was my arch nemesis rival. But yeah, in Kingscliff, northern New South Wales, we had Josh Watson, Chris Feidler, several other guys my age, very, very highly talented. So yeah, I took myself up north to escape, what many people would think is just, the end destination, Byron Bay. And I've traveled the world, and people are like, why aren't you in Byron Bay? And I'm like, well, it's one thing to go and visit the place and start up a new life as an adult. But, when you're there as a kid and you want to challenge yourself, as I did, I found that there was only so far that you could go in a place like beautiful Byron Bay.
Yeah.
Just curious, in terms of Byron Bay as itself, like, what was the community like? Were there people that were like-minded that did care about swimming like you, or were they all very much in the same mindset of being like, let's just do bongs, let's just muck around, let's do all of this, which kind of influenced the way you were during that time?
Byron Bay is an extremely polarizing community. I mean, there's several rock stars. Several of the guys I grew up with, I went to school with, they're members of Parkway Drive. You may or may not know them. Massive hardcore. At the same time, we've always had several surfers in the top 5 in the world. We've had different athletes, and we've it's littered with movie stars these days. However, as a professional swimmer, we had a 50-meter pool that wasn't heated during the year. We had a surf club, and some really, really famous Olympians, good boys and bad boys that were part of the surf club. But as far as swimming on a black line and making the Olympics, no, we didn't really have much that catered towards that, or my level of talent was just so far above my peers that I couldn't achieve any goal by staying in that small town kind of, so yeah.
What was it like moving from Byron to Queensland at that, I guess, tender age? It seems like you already had been exposed to so many different things, but it's still quite a young age.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the time I was gung-ho. I hadn't had that many crazy, traumatizing experiences, so I was a full head of steam, and I really wanted to kind of forget about my family, and focus on what I knew would be best for my life. And that's kind of what took me north. I started out in a boarding situation, and by the time I was 16 and a half years old, I had a studio for myself. So it had all the lovely pleasures of, young boy living
Your bachelor
by himself.
pad.
Yeah, bachelor pad, poker, parties, girls, but I was really, at the back of my mind was like, no, you can't piss this up the wall, Gene. Your family's made sacrifices, you've made sacrifices. You've made a commitment to yourself to leave the what do you call it in Byron Bay? The comfort zone, exactly, and challenge myself to something a little bit more worldly and esteemed.
That's really crazy. I think that's a topic that I've been thinking about, is that there are now today so many young athletes at the age of, say, 21 or 19, 20 that have just been basically given and handed so much.
Yeah.
And it's like, when you're so young, and how do you have that willpower to just say, like, you know what, no, I'm just going to focus on this and not just blow it on everything that you just mentioned. It's just, it requires just a different mindset to just think that, like, I want to get something and I want to get that thing,
Yeah, absolutely. Like all champions, Michael Phelps, before he did 8 gold medals, he didn't take one day out of the water. And, basically he, in his mind, it was like, for him to achieve those, crazy goals, he had to be more amphibious, more water orientated than more land orientated. So it borders on insanity.
I remember him saying once that I think for about 4 or 5 years consecutively, he didn't miss a single day.
Mm.
He didn't go a single day without swimming.
Yeah.
And the way he was thinking about it was so logical and so like structured. That means that if you take one day off occasionally, I'd be at the end of the year 50 days ahead of my competitors.
Yes.
And in like 5 years, I'd be 1 year ahead of my competitors. And you could just see, and this is obviously after he's won all these accolades.
Yeah.
But it wasn't at the end of his career yet, and it was still going.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That, and you know, Michael Phelps, a whole nother ball game. I understand what I've achieved and what I've not achieved. But yeah, absolutely. You know, it has to borderline insanity to be just, you know, waking up at 4:30 every day, jumping in a cold pool, you know, getting home from training, doing your shopping, having a sleep, going to the gym, having lunch, going back to the pool for 2 to 3 hours, you know, and this is why you might be nursing injuries, you know, like you might be going through some personal stuff, you know, like hundreds of times I was crying into my goggles, you know, just like, what is this? Why am I here? What am I doing? So yeah, it's, you know, and it leads to a lot of when you kind of do finally give this kind of thing up, it's consumed so much of your life and, you know, you've made so much sacrifice. You know, you'll see a lot of swimmers that have got into big trouble post-careers. You know, they've gone down the drugs path. They've all of a sudden they've gone from burning 10,000 calories today to not, and you know, and to so they get fat. They've got, you know, personal issues. Yeah, there's a big void that a lot of professional athletes succumb to post-career if they don't have, you know, the necessary support.
I'm definitely keen to explore that as well. I guess later in the podcast we'll touch on I guess your journey post your career, the swimming career as well. But I think from what I'm hearing in terms of your actual journey as an athlete, it sounds like, I'm sure it was very physically demanding, but the mental game is probably even the bigger challenge to conquer, and showing up every day and that discipline you need to kind of keep going in the lows and the highs. Maybe tell us about like what when you were in the thick of it, what would your average kind of day look like in terms of your training regimen and
Sure. So I'll take you back to the point where I was namely just an amateur swimmer. This is a few years on from Byron Bay. I'd established myself in Kingscliff, which this Olympic training squad was, and I was starting to catch up to these big time guys. You know, and at that point I was trying to recruit myself for the Division 1 scholarship in America. So I was handling things on a whole bunch of different levels, you know, but probably my most ruthless 3 to 4 months of training would be something like this. We would wake up in the morning, head to the pool, do 30 to 45 minutes of quite grueling calisthenics, plyometric, yoga training. Then we'd get in and it'll be 10 kilometers straight, you know, 200 laps, I believe. You know, 2.5, 3 hours later, you get out of the pool, go home, you have something to eat. At that point, we were just doing 10 kilometers in the morning and you'd get out and you wouldn't have to come back in the afternoon. And it was a really, really cool training block. And I'd secured myself a Division 1 scholarship. So I wanted to go over to the US and arrive there I wanted to arrive there looking really deadly. So that was a really cool training block I did for 3 to 4 months. And I was averaging about 60 kilometers of swimming each week.
Wow.
That's crazy.
What was your diet like?
Well, yeah, we've touched on with the food, and Chet is an avid vegan. I try and practice veganism these days. I grew up vegetarian, eating milk and different grains, but I had some anemia and iron problems as a teenager, so I actually started eating meat, and I didn't really, you know, you learn so much, and there's so much when you look back at your career as an adult that you wish you kind of knew back then and could have used and implemented to create that better result. Anyway, I was playing around with eating a little bit of animal-based stuff because my iron levels needed to come up. But yeah, essentially I really like to like the gladiators did back in the day, focus on my good grains, high protein stuff. Obviously the B12 is a bit of an issue with vegans, and that was my issue, the way my body was converting I think my heme iron was down. So my B12 was down. So basically I was living a vegetarian existence, but I wasn't getting that kind of binding assimilator for the proteins and whatever.
Yeah.
So I started going, a little bit more down the animal pathway, even though I grew up with lots of legumes and beans.
Yeah.
Just curious, what, in terms of just like tracking back to like, you know, you had those rigorous training days, because 10 kilometers would be insane, right? How would you say, like, objectively now where you're at, like, how would you assess your discipline to, say, swimming at that point? Because, I mean, we've talked about Michael Phelps having this, like, never missing a day with water. Yeah. But what was your experience with discipline, especially in regards to swimming at that age from when you went onwards?
Yeah, I guess, looking back at it now, there were several chips on my shoulder, whether it was to do with my father, my mother. I came from really, really good sporting pedigree from both sides of my family, whether it was my mother's father that was the captain of Geelong, or my grandfather boxed in the 1948 Olympics, my father. So yeah, I had a lot to prove as far as my family was concerned. I had a lot to prove from taking a couple of years out and not, having some of my peers, go above and beyond where I wanted to be at. So I really had I had the blood in my mouth, the blood in my teeth. That was how I approached every day. It wasn't even a consideration. It was like, you go and do it, man. Yeah. You go and you're going to this is the time to shine, and that Division 1 scholarship did come through. And after so many years of looking at that black line and not really getting reimbursed for it necessarily, other than the great lifestyle it afforded me, but, I had something to show at the end of the day with, a $25,000 scholarship each year, and being able to race all over the US brought the best out of my competitive side, and gave me a lot of confidence going and competing internationally. Yeah. And
that mentality, was that mirrored in all the competitors that you were kind of working against? Was that like the environment that was kind of like the opposite of Byron Bay, would you say? Or
yeah, absolutely. I was, everybody does it for different reasons. A couple of the guys, were maybe slightly more talented at me at that point, and they didn't put as much effort in. But, that was my reason to, do more than them, bench more than them, do more than them, not let them get any further ahead. So it came back to pay really good dividends, because I went to the US with a really, really rock solid mindset as far as being competitive and racing and just getting your hand on the wall first. Swimming comes down to that simplicity. You got to put your hand on that wall before the other guy does. It's really black and white, and that's what makes it kind of
appealing.
So on the note of, I guess, competition, I guess some of the, great champions in their respective fields or arts, I guess I've heard this common thing where it's like, they say they're kind of competing, the biggest competitor is themselves. And by doing that, even when they kind of get to the top, they're still wanting to get better and better, because you could be way ahead of everyone else, but still want to have that drive to go forward. Did you kind of feel that at times, that your biggest competition was yourself when you were kind of pushing yourself forward?
I got to answer probably honestly. At that point in time, probably no, because I measured myself against other people, against my family. At this point in my life, being a 40-year-old now, it's about being a little bit better than you were yesterday. But at that point in time, I was comparing myself to all and sundry every single day.
Which is natural.
The
as well.
cutthroat nature of it,
That's the environment you're in, and that's what the kind of, like you said, the person who touches the wall first, and that's a criteria you're starting with.
And that's it. So. And at some point, the person that keeps on touching the wall last, he has to hang up his goggles, as far as, so it's yeah,
that's really interesting. I guess I want to explore a bit more as well. Like, we kind of talked about how you got into swimming, and I understand you're a butterfly champion in particular.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit more about, like, how did you find your stroke, and what was the one for you? Is it more your body type and what kind of you're naturally inclined to, or was it just what you enjoyed more, or?
Yeah, look, I moved to Byron Bay and I couldn't do the butterfly at 7-8 years of age, and my coach came up with this kind of funny drill where we would dive down to the bottom of the water and then we'd come up and we'd kind of jump out of the water like butterflies. And butterfly swimming is essentially, it really looks like a super powerful stroke, and it is, but it's more a stroke of grace, and power. So yeah, I definitely I had a lot of I could execute the stroke much better than a lot of other people. So definitely I found a competitive niche very quickly in short butterfly races, although I was a good swimmer at all other strokes. And then, I carried that through to my career, and ultimately I was the Division 1 champion for the 100-yard butterfly. So butterfly comes down to a lot of timing, power, distance per stroke, relaxation. You don't see a butterfly swimmer fighting in the water. He's looking very powerful and strong and long, but it's more of a butterfly, and this is how I explain it to my students. I do lots of animal analogies, whether it's the dolphin kind of underneath the water, that's what we need to emulate. Or on top of the water, it's more of the butterfly kind of relaxed and effortless.
That's really cool. And I think we're just about to wrap up soon for the halfway point, but maybe a final question before we go. And I think of swimming as a sport is one where you kind of have to be in control of your body and what you're doing, but at the same time you're adapting. The environment around you is constantly kind of shifting, and it's even truer for open water swimming when you got waves and all these other things happening. So I guess you as a person, do you consider yourself to be someone who is that kind of more adaptable and flexible to what life throws your way, how you are in the pool, or would you consider yourself, say, more grounded and kind of prefer that stability and routine, or how would you do? Maybe the question is your personality outside of the water, is that kind of
the crux of it? Chet, that is a fantastic question, and it really goes down to the polarization of my life. I grew up with such a regimented regime, like 15 minutes of science study, 15 minutes of math study, straight to the pool. I had a picture of Kieran Perkins on my bedside. I was in bed at 7:30. I was up giving my mother a cup of tea at 4:55, asking her to. So yes, so much structure, and I really, really do really well with structure. However, like I said, I was going through those different mental battles. Thinking laterally and viewing the world as not just black and white taught me a lot. In saying that, the structure and discipline and success that I've had in my life with several other different aspects and vocations or whatever it is, always comes back to the discipline that swimming gave me. And that mindset that you really have to give to it.
No, that's really beautifully said. I think on that note, we might just take a quick little intermission, and we'll come back and maybe explore a bit more about your athletic career and I guess what happened after as well. So yeah, thanks for this so far.
Intermission quiz time. Where did Jean grow up? Was it A, Byron Bay, B, Sunshine Coast, C, Wyoming, or D, North Korea? If you selected A, Byron Bay, congratulations, you win a cookie. Now back to the video.
So when we left off at the first half, we had you in a D1 scholarship in America. What university were you at?
University of Wyoming in the Rocky Mountains. It's about a 2-hour drive from Denver, Colorado.
Nice.
Midwest, yeah.
Lots of outdoor area. Like, I think the whole culture there is just outdoors, isn't it?
Yeah. And, you know, the funny thing was the altitude of our university alone, we live in Australia.
Yeah.
Mount Kosciuszko is 2,200 meters, and that's the peak of our Australian mountains. That was what my university was based at.
Wow.
Yeah. So
and so the Rocky Mountains are higher up from there
the Rocky
as well.
Mountains go up from there. So I'm sure you guys have heard about high altitude training.
Yeah.
It's where teams and athletes, they will either sleep in hyperbaric chambers or they will go and I've done several camps at Thredbo, or, you know, University of Wyoming was one of the highest campuses.
Wow.
And we were basically unbeaten because, you know, several teams would come up, and as swimming, as you know, you need oxygen to swim. So I don't know if you've done much hiking through the Himalayas or mountains and adjusted to altitude, but yeah, it can get quite confronting because there's not the same amount of oxygen within the breath of air that you're breathing in. So it takes you a couple of days to acclimatize to it, and which is why elite athletes go and seek out this training, because they go and train there for weeks and or months, and it increases the red blood cell count or the oxygen carrying capacity within your body.
Wow.
So yeah, it was quite an advantage. At the same time, you have to structure your training a lot differently because the way your body recovers is totally different to, you know, as it does at sea level, basically.
Yeah. And did you find that helped you a lot, being in a different environment completely, where you had a very structured program, where there was a whole team behind you? I'm not sure to what level you had a massive team behind you here when you were training up in Queensland, but when you were there, I know American colleges take their sports very seriously. And so when you were there, when you were training to be the best in the world, what was your mindset?
Well, yeah, it was a breath of fresh air from going from a reasonable sized fish in a pond to being like the best fish out of 50 swimmers and like a Division 1 full paid scholarship athlete. You know, I was all of a sudden basically a rock star, whereas here in Australia, you know, I was a great swimmer, fantastic swimmer. But the whole team environment that the US fosters, the way they recruit athletes from all over the world, they focus on your not just being a great athlete in your pool, because they get different talent from all over the world. You know, it might be some basketballer that's grown up on the streets of Chicago, and he's got 2 drug addict parents or whatever, you know, but he gets recruited as a full scholarship athlete. So, you know, he doesn't have the same coping mechanisms and same social. He hasn't been brought up like me and you per se, basically. So yeah, you're different. You're dealing with a lot of different mindsets and personalities. So yeah, the student side of it really has to go hand in hand, and it's not easy when you're trying to build a winning program, for example, and you've got to go and get this superstar, but he's got no kind of social skills or whatever it is. So every different student is a different example. So yeah, it was very, very, very interesting. It opened my eyes a lot.
Just
What
curious.
I was just going to ask, what did you study while you were there?
I enrolled in kinesiology and health promotion with a major in athletic training. My first year was filled with lots of basic subjects. As a freshman, you've got to go over there and you've got to redo chemistry, you've got to redo physics, you've got to redo your English, you've got to redo your maths. It's kind of like your final year of high school all over again. And, you know, I didn't actually complete high school in Australia. I did a pathways thing intertwined with TAFE, and that's how I got my start in America. But yeah, it was, the school books taught me a lot as well. I failed a few subjects.
Though we all have.
I think we've talked a lot about like say like your experience in terms of like competitive swimming in the arena, you know, and was there a catalyst event which kind of made you take a step back from like overt competitive swimming to then transition into where you're the space that you're in now, or was it more of like a gradual kind of like to get where you are now? Like what was the kind of transition like?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question. Yeah, I guess you go there and they say we're going to give you a scholarship for 4 years, and they want to kind of execute that, and they want you to graduate, and they want you to also win and do the team. They want you to be a good investment. So yeah, I wanted to go to the US and complete a degree, something that I probably wouldn't have gone down the path of here in Australia. So that was always at the back of my mind, try and complete the degree, get the degree done. But yeah, obviously I was a tenacious competitor and swimming was why I was there. So to answer your question concisely, I probably didn't realise like exactly where I wanted to go with my post-career and when I got back to Australia. Yeah, so that was kind of some years later as in my mid-20s.
Mid-20s. Interesting.
Tell us about the journey from being a student to the World Cup.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, the World Cups that I did compete in were only they were equaled by the competition that I had in the States so we would travel all around the Midwest. Any given weekend, we would go down to Colorado State University or San Diego State University or University of Las Vegas. You know, we had different dual meets during the year, and then we would have one big one at the end of the year. So it was all kind of geared towards that focus.
Yep.
And were you in those World Cups? You were representing your university or like Australia? Or how did that kind of work?
Just depends with the World Cups. World Cups aren't exactly like Olympics per se, where you have to be the top two in Australia to get a start. It's very, very competitive. Not a lot of people, especially if you come from the US or Australia, where we've got so much depth and talent. To make the Olympics is a huge thing. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, and maybe wrapping up on your professional career as a swimming athlete, maybe could you tell us, looking back, like, is there a particular moment or aspect of that career that you're particularly proud of in terms of your achievements or even the process and what the work you put in? Any
Thanks, Chip,
moments stand out?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, and I've alluded to, I had many things in the back of my mind, you know, as to why I was this dog-headed, this persistent, this narrow-minded towards this kind of end goal. Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Moment you were most proud of?
Yeah, sure. So the moment, it was definitely my third year in college. I was a junior. I travelled to Oklahoma City for our end-of-year Mountain West Conference Division Championships. I was racing a guy from Canada who was also a future Olympian himself. It was a fierce rivalry. He was a full scholarship athlete at the University of Las Vegas, Joe Bartow. If you're listening, I'll give you a shout-out, mate. Anyway, yeah, so it's a very, very fierce, competitive nature, and yeah, it was kind of all the hard work, all the training, everything culminated years and years and years. And I remember listening to a Tupac song. I don't know if you guys are rappers or not, but I grew up with that. Anyway, it was that "Tonight's the Night" was the song, and it was, you know, tonight's the night, and that was kind of my mantra. And I kind of knew I was going to win this race before I went out there and did it, and it really was like a kind of dream. You know, I went out there, won the race, swam beautifully, you know, and that was definitely the peak of my career. 48.04 seconds. I think it was 2004. I was the Division 1 Mountain West Conference champion,
That's
For the
beautiful.
Butterfly 100?
Yeah, 100 yards, yes.
Wow.
100 yards,
No
wow.
swimming yards over there,
Yeah. No, that's crazy.
Yeah, that was a defining moment. I realized, okay, like, you know, you've all these years and years and years and years and years, Like I'm happy to hang up my swim cap after
Mm.
that.
So
Yeah.
you could feel that in the moment, or is this more like in hindsight when you look back, you feel that, or even in the thick of it, you're like, that's it, I made it.
Yeah, absolutely. It was definitely a great kind of, benchmark thing. It's kind of like when you get that degree and you throw your hat up in the air, it's like that moment where you're, okay, I can call myself a professional swimmer.
There's
Yeah.
tangible kind of success.
Yeah, even though, I've could have, drawn upon lots of different successes I had there. Even just getting there as an athlete that took a couple of years off, that was a huge win. But, to go there and do it and then lead my team to greatness, definitely. It was a defining moment for sure.
What did you do to celebrate?
Oh my God.
If you don't remember, that's a good sign.
Can we even air that?
I mean, your university was near Colorado. Weren't they the first state in America to legalize weed? I assume that was your doing while you were there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Gene for president.
I haven't been shy about the town that I'm from. I come from a very alternative part of the world where we have the best food. We have, the cleanest water to swim in. We've got the cleanest air.
Where's that?
Byron Bay.
Oh, in Byron Bay, sure.
Australia.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm.
It is pristine, kind of, it's,
So you brought a bit of Byron to America when you were there.
Absolutely, brought a lot of Byron to America. Yeah, it was, and it wasn't just going to one of the main cities. It was very interesting being out in the middle of John Wayne country, where all the westerns were made. These were the kind of roundabout people that I would, live with cowboys and, people that just would not even understand an Aussie accent.
Yeah. I'm surprised you spent 4 years there and still have the proper Aussie accent. I know I spent 1 year in America and I came back rolling my R's and it was a bit embarrassing, to be honest.
This guy came back full American and everything.
No, I totally agree.
Yeah.
Absolutely, man. Yeah. And that's the first. Most people say the opposite, like what Dylan's just said about you. To me, like you don't sound necessarily Aussie, or
Oh,
and
really?
I guess dealing with people from all walks of life and cultures. If you really want to communicate with them, you've got to pronunciate and be concise, and you can't be dragging out this Aussie bogan or the lingo that I grew up with in Byron Bay. Like it just doesn't fly on these people.
Yeah.
Just to play devil's advocate, I guess. I think we touched upon what your proudest moment was.
Yeah.
But if there was something that you could share, was that would possibly like a regret? Is there anything that kind of comes to mind, or are you at? Is there
or like least proud of?
least proud of?
moment?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I think I mentioned in the break, I wasn't a squeaky clean student whatsoever. I was the Division 1 full scholarship athlete, fastest, this, that, and the other. But I'd go home and smoke a bit of chi bar with my mate and do yoga, and we'd go and party on the weekends, and we had lots of different cultures in our team, and people that didn't drink at all, people that were totally adverse to this kind of alternative lifestyle that I would. So yeah, I mean, it did get a little bit too much for me, and in my senior year, I just split my wrist from skateboarding, and word started getting around that I wasn't fully focused and that I was smoking a little bit too much green, and technically that's what you're not supposed to do, and they can drug test you. And then I did get drug tested, and in the end I ended up just admitting, and I think it was a culmination of my personal trauma and stuff going on here, because I was a lot of the time down in Denver for 2-3 days at a time, partying my head off, not sleeping on all and sundry, and then I'd come back, hit the pool at 5 a.m, and nobody would beat me, even if I was smashed 30 Jack and Cokes, and I'd rather vomit in the gutter than get beaten. But I wasn't towing the line of the ideal team captain, because I was a little bit of a naughty boy as well. So yeah, I definitely, probably looking back, I wish I kind of understood the opportunity I had at my fingertips a little bit more, and it would have been nice to go out on and more of an elevated high. But everything happens for a reason, and it's the reason why I'm sitting here today. And so yeah, I wouldn't say regrets, but yeah, definitely have done some things differently.
And I think having that awareness alone is the most important thing, because that by taking the lessons away from this, it's more that going forward you can do things better from now on. So like you said, it all happens for a reason.
We live to learn.
Yeah, I think what's also really great about your journey is that you've kind of experienced the full spectrum of life, and that's something that a lot of people are sometimes a little bit not emboldened to kind of go out and do because of just what convention might be, what things might be, and
stepping outside your comfort zone.
exactly,
right?
yeah. And I'm just curious, like in terms of like where you are now, in terms of like how you, so because you're a coach now and how you kind of coach people, do you think that's kind of given you a depth in terms of being able to deal with other people? And what's your mindset to being able to like coach people? Like how do you kind of approach that, I guess?
Great question. Like I said, I came back from the US with a bit of a polarizing experience. Not all good, not all bad, but great, really fucking life experiences. And I immediately took that to doing some PT in Sydney, and I ended up with my dream job out at the icebergs. As a PT, I guess to be successful, you really have to get on that person's level, whether they're boy, girl, fat, ugly, skinny. You got to understand what makes them tick in order for them to pay you, kind of thing. So I guess that was a great skill set I had as a young age, not to mention my knowledge about the, yoga and body, weight and, absolutely. Understanding and having a little bit of life experience really opened up the possible clientele that I could deal with and work with. So it's great, life experience. I mean, it's not easy stepping outside your comfort zone and at all.
It's kind of like building empathy, right? I guess from what you're describing, the teacher-student relationship, and I guess also coming back to, you were actually my swim coach for a few weeks last year when the story went that me and Anuraj went for a swim once, and we were struggling to even do 50 meters. And I was like, you know what? I just signed up for a 3-kilometer ocean swim in 2 weeks' time, and I was like, I probably need a coach, and I find you online. So that was our origin story. And in that 2 weeks, we had like a few sessions where we just did all kinds of crazy drills, and that was awesome. But I think why I thought you were such a great teacher is I felt like it's that empathy component where I feel like you can, when you put yourself in your students' shoes, you can understand kind of their strengths, their weaknesses, their limits, and kind of push them to that full potential without kind of breaking them at the same time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. And just like you say, we probably did 2, 3, 4 sessions. We didn't really know each other, but the skill of a personal trainer or a coach is to quickly ascertain and understand where that person is, how far you can go with them. I remember we all jumped into meditation and visualization pretty quickly, kind of thing. As in my younger career as a personal trainer over in the glossy parts of the eastern suburbs or Dubai, there's certain things that you can bring up at certain times with people. So understanding what makes them tick and quickly going to that and building that rapport and trust, is only going to benefit the end result, which is the client's success, and then ultimately, the personal trainer's reputation.
No, it's beautiful.
We talked earlier a little bit about how professional athletes kind of have a void once they hang up their shoes for whatever athletic sport or activity that they're doing. And you said earlier that you really wanted to complete your degree in America and get that certification and get trained. Was that transition quite seamless for you, or did you have a bit of a void that after you came back to Australia where you were a little bit lost and you weren't sure?
Looking for purpose.
Well, absolutely. 1 year of trialing out this Division 1 thing turned into 5 years, and it turned into 3.5 years of being the rock star of the team, and then a year of getting my scholarship but being the bad boy that had kind of let it down his team and all of this stuff. So I had a lot of soul searching to do, obviously, and I will get into this in another podcast, but I saw some very interesting stuff in America that you don't necessarily see here in Australia. being privy to the party and the extracurricular stuff that people do, and the nuances and between Australia and so yeah.
So you once you came back, you were quite quickly, seamlessly into like the PT gene.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it took me a little bit, and
Yeah.
I got a small offer in Sydney, and I took that offer, and I was fully qualified and whatnot.
Yeah.
Moved down here, started working for minimum wage. I think it was $18 at the time, and I was like, oh my god, because I heard of personal trainers charging a lot more than that.
Yeah.
Anyway, that quickly led to me getting my dream kind of situation.
So I guess maybe generalizing this, like what kind of advice would you have to, say, people who are looking to change or gear up in their life and switch kind of, either their job or, just their lifestyle, in terms of making that transition, that soul searching and all that process, from your experience, what are the kind of, what's the advice you would give?
Yeah, great question, Chet. As an athlete, you have to be very selfish, and you have to draw on lots of support and from lots of different people. Not only that, it's costly. So, yeah, I would say mentorship, number one. Find a good coach, find a good mentor, find somebody that can you can talk it out with, without them being judgmental of you, for sure. Because there's lots of points in my life where I feel alone, I feel small, I don't feel like this fantastic person that's kind of done all this great stuff, and lots of people see me as this, but we've all got our insecurities at the end of the day. And absolutely, I think being able to talk it out, obviously your support network, your top 5, as they always say. Who are your top 5? What does your top 5 mean to you? What does each person in that top 5 bring to where you're going, where your mind is galvanized? I think that's quite important stuff, because at my lowest points, when you feel alone is when you can't talk it out or seek guidance, and it doesn't always have to be somebody that's a guru or whatever. It's somebody that you can trust and that you can talk about anything with. Keep the dialogue open.
No, there's definitely a lot of value to that mentorship, and I experienced it firsthand from yourself. I think, for me, when you're starting any kind of discipline, whether it's a sport or art or music, whatever it is, having a teacher is so important there. Just A, to keep you disciplined, keep you in check and accountable, and B, what you said, the support, and just like, someone who you can talk it out with. But I think also there's like just blind spots, things that you just don't even know exist, and they just have that experience and wisdom that they can share.
Absolutely, yeah. We're trying to remove remove barriers to your success. So me as a coach, I quite quickly, I have so much belief and faith in my students, and they don't have that same belief and faith in themselves. But I have to be quite firm and authoritative with them. Like, no, you are going to do that, and you're going to do it really well. And they might laugh at me, or they might look at me like, oh, is this guy really serious? But I'm actually really fucking serious. Yeah, like with you, I know I pushed you out of your comfort zone. And at times you were like, like I might just do this. I'm like, no, that's what you're doing, Chet. And yeah. So I want you to give you the tools to success, but I also want you to believe in yourself the way my eyes can see it.
Yeah, no, and I definitely felt the tangible change in those 2 weeks we were together. By the end, I was just kind of gliding through that water, and I felt like I could honestly go on forever. Like starting from barely being able to do 50 to kind of 2.5K. I finished that ocean swim, and I was like, oh, that's it. I should have signed up for the 5K one. Like, that was almost too easy.
Yeah, like, and you wouldn't have believed me if I said just leave your flippers on the beach. You would have said no, coach.
Yeah.
But you could have done that quite easily as well. Anyway, there's no rush. That was more of a little personal thing that that you hired me for, and we had a great result in a short amount of time, and it removed all kinds of different barriers to success that you previously didn't realise were there.
Yeah, so this is a quick plug for all potential swimmers in Sydney to go to Gene for all your swim training needs. But I would like to, I guess, talk about your other ventures. So we kind of touched on your PT and swim coaching, but since you've come back, I know you're dabbling in all kinds of other things as well, like around calisthenics and other entrepreneurship aspects. So without necessarily getting into the detail, I'd like to understand, like, what is your kind of drive or purpose underlying all of these things? Do you have like a certain vision for yourself or the world that's pushing you forward in all these different ways?
Yeah, absolutely I do. And yeah, you know, I grew up in a time pre-COVID where I could travel the world freely. I mean, it did cost money, obviously, and traveling around the world and seeing a bunch of different countries hasn't come cheaply, but at the end of the day, I've got a lot of it subsidized, and I didn't have any red tape as far as going and doing it. So, you know, I'm mortified as a person that we could put our young people through what they had to go through. You know, you guys are, you know, maybe a little bit more. You guys are all 20, 21, right?
25, 26.
20, yeah, sorry.
Glad that we look 20, 21 though. That's a compliment.
I'll take that.
Yeah, so I mean, you guys have got a little bit more. You've got a little bit more of the world about you to deal with what we've dealt with in the last couple of years. But you know, I think locking people up and putting kids through the same stuff. You know, when I look back at my life and how blessed I was and how free I was to travel the world, how free I was to travel Australia. You know, I really want to give back. So a lot of my stuff with the street workout stuff is about giving back. I do want to leverage, and thanks for bringing up that topic, and hopefully release the Gene Birks swimming application where you can lodge a video. I will give you personalised and structured programs and advice pertaining to your success as far as swimming. So yeah, that's my short-term goal, is to release a swimming app.
That's really beautiful, and in doing so, you're kind of making all of this wisdom and learnings from your experience accessible to a much wider audience, not just your immediate students, but anyone who has the internet or a phone can benefit from it. So that's it's and even during lockdowns, they can practice from the confines of their house, I guess. So it's a good service you're doing. So good job.
Thank you.
On that note, I think. Sorry, did you have one more question, maybe?
Yeah, I was just gonna have one fun little question. What's the purpose of life, Gene? What's the meaning of life?
Nothing.
Nothing is the meaning of life.
No.
Have fun.
No, nothing. There is no meaning to life.
Yeah.
We're here to we're here to experience the moment. The moment's polarizing. There's no end game in life. There is no meaning to life whatsoever. It's a however you want to.
However
We
you
give
wanna
it
make I
meaning.
guess.
It's an energy exchange, and there's no right or wrong, and hence there is no meaning.
No, that's beautiful. I think it just a nice full circle to the start of this podcast, where we were kind of just coming to the moment and experiencing the reality that we were in. So let's leave it on that note. Thanks, I guess, to our listeners for joining us. Hope you guys got as much value out of this conversation as we did and had some fun along the way. Definitely follow Mr. Gene on the Instagrams and all your socials. I'm sure we'll put that in the description.
Yep.
And we'll thank you again for joining us, and I'm sure we'll probably see you again on the podcast.
Yeah, we'd love to have you back, Gene.
Sometime in the future.
Thank you so much for giving me the platform to have a little bit of a chat about my life, and not all about swimming success, as I think I've kind of tried to let you guys know. So I really appreciate your professionalism and everything that we've done together, and I really look forward to the next cast.
Hell yeah.
Stay tuned.
Keen.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Awesome.
Right. See you next time. Bye.
Au revoir.
Thanks, everyone.
And that's a wrap.